will be broadcasting live at the White Hart Hotel for Mirador Television, of which I am the energy correspondent. I am also editor and publisher of greenbarrel.com, a website aimed at increasing investment to renewable energy companies. Today, I'd like to speak about the chaos and fiasco in energy pricing, of which we're all been made very aware of. Last September, I was actually going around to my friends and neighbours and telling them that their energy bills are going to go up exponentially in October. This is because Ofgem, the government regulator, sets an energy cap twice a year, once on the 1st of April and once on the 1st of October. So they could look through to a nasty little increase on October 1, and that turned out to be the case, and I will come to that later. The energy crisis which we face now has its origins in 1974, when us elderly people, well, young people, had the winter of discontent, where we were all sitting in our houses, heating up a bowl of soup with a candle. And Edward Heath had a 3-day week because of the coal miners being on strike. Anyway, that passed, and it was realised there was an awful lot of gas in the North Sea. And eventually, I think it was in the early 80s or late 90s, the Conservative government, I think it was a Mrs. Thatcher at the time, decided to privatise the companies, the supply companies, and that created an oligopolistic cartel of 6 big energy suppliers who were doing what they liked with prices. They could put them up, they could put them down, they could dance around the maypole with them. But it turned out that they became a political issue because their prices were going haywire. Well, Ed Miliband, who was then the leader of the Labour opposition, said, if I get into power, I'm going to introduce an energy cap. Well, he didn't get into power. David Cameron did in 1915. But the sort of fickle David Cameron didn't know what to do about an energy cap, and he asked the Competition and Mergers Authority, which was in his power, to come up with what they think. And after a year of waiting, the Competition and Mergers Authority say, tell everybody switch to cheaper suppliers. But there weren't that many, and the ones that there were all a bunch of gangsters and crooks, and people wanted to make a fast buck. Anyway, quite a lot of companies did set up as suppliers. And then, eventually, as we all know, once the gas price spiked, 28 of the 50 cheaper companies went bust. And the government sort of tried to actually do something about it, getting so forth. And it then had, with all these companies going by, there was a crisis in pricing because the government didn't know what to do. So they eventually said, we're going to drop the VAT on energy supply. That's 5%. And we're going to drop that equity levies, which they have to encourage wind farms and so on. And we're going to extend the warm house project, where the poor and vulnerable can get £140 back off their bills. Now, there are 2.7 million houses which benefit from the scheme. There are 28.5 million houses in the country, most of them fed by gas, could also benefit from the scheme. But the scheme, and that they didn't do any of those things. And instead, they looked for other ways. And they said, well, what we're going to do is have a conference contract for difference, CFD. And most people don't understand what that means. It means that the government and the companies, it was a five people oligopolistic cartel now. One of them has dropped out. And they would set an agreed price. Now, if the gas price went above the agreed price, the government had to pay for the difference. And if it went below the gas price, the companies had to pay the difference. And that conference tradition had worked very, very well for renewables. The government would pay for a wind farm to be built, but the price of it never went down. So they had a wind farm all set and ready to go. Now, in this case, if the gas price did spike, the government would have to pay all of the difference. And this really spooked Rishi Sunak. So he waited, and he came up with this ridiculous system of giving everybody £100 down and then £200 loan, which could be paid over the years. Well, that's absolute bloody madness. It doesn't help at all. So now, what happened last October is they increased the tariff by 700 quid. That means a typical 3-bedroom house would face a tariff of 2,000 quid. Well, that's a lot of money for some people to say. And given what's happening with inflation, that is going to mean fuel policy for a lot of people. But it gets worse. After April, and people are going to have to live with that, there'll be another energy cap level in October the 1st. And people like Martin Lewis and myself, and I may not modestly say so, think there's going to be another big spike. The guessing game is 54. That means the average tariff for a 3-bedroom house will work out as £3,000 a year. Well, God almighty, what are the people in Lamport going to do about that? And the local council is absolutely, totally incompetent. 2 years ago, I attended the sustainability meeting, and they said then that we are going to have zero carbon emissions by 2030 for the district, Lewis district. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? They said, well, we're going to plant lots of electric charging points and plant some trees. I said, well, do you have a joint up plan like Vesco, which is a company here which puts solar panels on roofs of schools? And they say so many solar panels will mean so many emissions reductions. And the guys running the sustainability said, oh, we don't have a, could you do one for us? And I said, no, I bloody well can't. I'm a busy man. So anyway, scroll forward to about 3 months ago, 2 years on, the actual update by the local council says we are going to say some ridiculous things. First, they're looking at electric charging points. Do you know how many electric public charging points there are in the list? 8. It's not a lot of good to anybody, is it? And I think some of them don't work anyway. And then the other thing is that they don't know what the trees are doing, really. And so we have another situation where, people in October are going to face bills of 300,000 quid. Well, who can afford that? And that is where we are. So, goodbye at the moment. I've been giving this talk on behalf of Mirador Television. Thank you. Goodbye.